Hello, young humans. It's your old friend, Michael Chabon, and I'm here for story time. I want to start out just by saying hi to Eleanor. You do a very good job of being me. I love seeing the video of you reading Where the Wild Things Are. And today I'm gonna get right to it. It's a little long. This one's called The Little House. It's by Virginia Lee Burton, who did Katie and the Big Snow, and Mike Mulligan and his steam shovel. I guess I'm a really big Virginia Lee Burton fan because I love this one too. This might be my favorite of all. So let's just jump right in with The Little House. Here's the title page with some extra illustrations. There's the house. Once upon a time, there was a little house way out in the country. She was a pretty little house, and she was strong and well built. The man who built her so well said, "This little house shall never be sold for gold or silver, and she will live to see our great-great-grandchildren's great-great-grandchildren living in her." Wow, that is a long time. Your great-great-grandchildren's great-great-grandchildren. That is a very long time. That's almost 200 years, I think. That's what the man who built it said. Let's see what happens to the little house. The little house was very happy as she sat on the hill and watched the countryside around her. She watched the sun rise in the morning, and she watched the sun set in the evening. Day followed day, each one a little different from the one before, but the little house stayed just the same. See her on her little hill? In the nights, she watched the moon grow from a thin new moon to a full moon, then back again to a thin old moon. And when there was no moon, she watched the stars. Way off in the distance, she could see the lights of the city. The little house was curious about the city and wondered what it would be like to live there. And there's the little house at night, out in the country. See those lights shining way there? That's the lights of the city. It's far, far away when the little house is new. Time passed quickly for the little house as she watched the countryside slowly change with the seasons. In the spring, when the days grew longer and the sun grew warmer, she waited for the first robin to return from the south. She watched the grass turn green. She watched the buds on the trees swell and the apple trees burst into blossom. She watched the children playing in the brook. That's springtime in the world of the little house. You can see it's a long time ago still because there's horse-drawn wagons. Here are the robins. In long summer days, she sat in the sun and watched the trees cover themselves with leaves and the white daisies cover the hill. She watched the gardens grow, and she watched the apples turn red and ripen. She watched the children swimming in the pool. And here it is summertime. See the children swimming in the pool? Everything's green. In the fall, when the days grew shorter and the nights colder, she watched the first frost turn the leaves to bright yellow and orange and red. She watched the harvest gathered and the apples picked. She watched the children going back to school. Here's autumn. See, same hill, same house. Everything all around is changing with the seasons. There's the pool, but it's probably too cold to go swimming now. In the winter, when the nights were long and the days short and the countryside covered with snow, she watched the children coasting and skating. Year followed year. The apple trees grew old and new ones were planted. The children grew up and went away to the city. And now, at night, the lights of the city seemed brighter and closer. Here's winter time, see? See the children on the pool. Now it's frozen over, so they slide and they skate. There's some snowflakes. The city's getting closer. The city's growing. One day, the little house was surprised to see a horseless carriage coming down the winding country road. That's a car. Pretty soon there were more of them on the road, and fewer carriages pulled by horses. Pretty soon along came some surveyors and surveyed a line in front of the little house. Surveyors are people who measure the land and decide where to put roads and buildings and fences. Pretty soon along came a steam shovel and dug a road through the hill covered with daisies. Then some trucks came and dumped big stones on the road. Then some trucks with little stones. And finally, a steam roller came and rolled it all smooth, and the road was done. Look. The city, the countryside is changing, and the city is coming to the country. And the way that starts is with building a big road. And look, here's a steam shovel. It looks familiar, doesn't it? It looks like our old friend Mary Ann from Mike Mulligan. Now the little house watched the trucks and automobiles going back and forth to the city. Gasoline stations, roadside stands, and small houses followed the new road. Everyone and everything moved much faster now than before. Okay, are you ready for this picture? This one's kind of a shock. Look what's happened. Wow. All these new houses and cars and people. There's some people in their car stopping for an old-fashioned traffic light. More roads were made, and the countryside was divided into lots. More houses and bigger houses, apartment houses and tenement houses, schools, stores, and garages spread over the land and crowded around the little house. No one wanted to live in her and take care of her anymore. She couldn't be sold for gold and silver, so she just stayed there and watched. Because remember, the man who built her, he put it in his will, I suppose. He made it clear to everyone who came after him they were never allowed to sell the house. So she stays while everything around her changes. And look at that. Here come all the cars. Look how things have changed. Now it was not so quiet and peaceful at night. Now the lights of the city were bright and very close, and the street lights shone all night. This must be living in the city, thought the little house, and didn't know whether she liked it or not. She missed the field of daisies and the apple trees dancing in the moonlight. Here's nighttime now. Street lights. Pretty soon, there were trolley cars going back and forth in front of the little house. They went back and forth all day, and part of the night everyone seemed to be very busy, and everyone seemed to be in a hurry. Now it's really growing, isn't it? And look, there she is. It's part of the big city now. An even bigger city back there. Pretty soon, there was an elevated train going back and forth above the little house. The air was filled with dust and smoke, and the noise was so loud that it shook the little house. Now she couldn't tell when spring came, or summer, or fall, or winter. It all seemed about the same, because she was used to seeing things like the leaves changing color. See the elevated train? There's still trains like this in New York City and in Chicago and in other cities. Pretty soon there was a subway going back and forth underneath the little house. She couldn't see it, but she could feel it and hear it. People were moving faster and faster. No one noticed the little house anymore. They hurried by without a glance. Look at this. It's a full page. Virginia Lee Burton was such a wonderful illustrator of buildings and machines. She really looked closely at how things work. And where's the little house? Right in there, see? And the people are just rushing past. Pretty soon, they tore down the apartment houses and tenement houses around the little house and started digging big cellars, one on each side. The steam shovels dug down 3 stories on one side and 4 stories on the other side. Pretty soon, they started building up. They built up 25 stories on one side and 35 stories on the other. Now look, a story is the floor of a tall building, right? 1 story, 2 story, 3 story, 4 story. Buildings are made out of stories. Now the little house only saw the sun at noon and didn't see the moon or stars at night at all because the lights of the city were too bright. She didn't like living in the city. At night, she used to dream of the country and the field of daisies and the apple trees dancing in the moonlight. The little house was very sad and lonely. Her paint was cracked and dirty. Her windows were broken and her shutters hung crookedly. She looked shabby, though she was just as good a house as ever underneath. See? Let's go in close so we can see what's become of her. She's all boarded up. Underneath, just as good. Then, one fine morning in spring, along came the great-great-granddaughter of the man who built the little house so well. She saw the shabby little house, but she didn't hurry by. There was something about the little house that made her stop and look again. She said to her husband, "That little house looks just like the little house my grandmother lived in when she was a little girl, only that little house was way out in the country on a hill covered with daisies and apple trees growing around." Now we're in a big modern city, full of people and cars and trains and smoke and buildings. And I think right here, I think this is the woman and her husband and their 2 children whose grandmother grew up in that house. They found out it was the very same house, so they went to the movers to see if the little house could be moved. The movers looked the little house all over and said, "Sure, this house is as good as ever. She's built so well we could move her anywhere." So they jacked up the little house and put her on wheels. Traffic was held up for hours as they slowly moved her out of the city. And look at this. Look what's happening here. First, look at all the people who are stopped. All the traffic is stopped on both sides. Everyone's waiting. The mounted police on a horse there. And here, that's her old cellar. And they've got her. They jacked her up. They lifted her up. They put her on this trailer, hooked her to the truck. Here's the family that are moving her. And off they go. At first, the little house was frightened. But after she got used to it, she rather liked it. They rolled along the big road, and they rolled along the little roads until they were way out in the country. When the little house saw the green grass and heard the birds singing, she didn't feel sad anymore. They went along and along, but they couldn't seem to find just the right place. They tried the little house here, they tried her there. Finally, they saw a little hill in the middle of a field and apple trees growing around. "There," said the great-great-granddaughter, "that's just the place." "Yes, it is," said the little house to herself. A cellar was dug on top of the hill, and slowly they moved the house from the road to the hill. See, they left the city behind. They drove all the way out, and they found the perfect hill for her. The windows and shutters were fixed, and once again they painted her a lovely shade of pink. As the little house settled down on her new foundation, she smiled happily. Once again, she could watch the sun and moon and stars. Once again, she could watch spring and summer and fall and winter come and go. Once again, she was lived in and taken care of. Look, she's back where she should be, in a good place in the country with the seasons, the sun and the moon and the stars. Never again would she be curious about the city. Never again would she want to live there. The stars twinkled above her. A new moon was coming up. It was spring, and all was quiet and peaceful in the country. All right, well, I hope you liked that story. I sure liked reading it to you. I'll see you next time. Until then, stay safe, be kind, have fun. Bye.